Hey, welcome to Culturally Sound. I'm here with Nadim. He's the founder of Scale Wave Marketing. Um, Nadim, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself? We'll get into it.
Sure. So first and foremost, Chandler, thank you for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure as always, and we can dive right in. So I've been running Scale Wave now for about 7.5 years. We're bordering on 8 years. And my story is a little bit interesting because I never had a marketing background per se. I started this agency when I was in college in my second year of university. And it came off the back of a few failed attempts at different startups. So at first, I tried to build an app. We developed a team, we got an MVP out. Then we realized, wait, and I had never thought about marketing before this, but once we actually built the MVP, we had about 10 or 15 of our friends using the app. And then the question came about of how are we going to scale this? And one word comes to mind, and that's marketing. And my first inclination as an 18-year-old was, damn, this is going to be expensive. So I started looking up how much it costs to market an app. I'm seeing 50,000, 60,000 a month in ad spend, 100,000. And I honestly started panicking, but it interested me because I started thinking about what are some grassroots strategies that we can run to try to get this off the ground without breaking the bank, essentially. And that's what first got me passionate about marketing because I started to realize that the average person thinks marketing and they just think ads or TV or billboards. When in reality, marketing is an umbrella term that encompasses so many different facets of capturing attention that it's even hard to wrap your mind around. So after the app idea failed, I actually had a clothing brand, and that was my first attempt at cold email marketing. I got a list of all up and coming rappers and performers off of SoundCloud and YouTube, got their email addresses by just simply scraping their websites and channels. And I started emailing them to basically send them a sample of my clothing and have them try it out. And I had no success with this for about 1 month, 2 months. And on the third month, we actually got a response from a pretty significant rapper. And I thought, wow, this actually works. Then, of course, they asked for money. I realized what it takes to actually sign a promotional contract and do influencer marketing. But then that was basically me unlocking a second level of marketing. I'd never even heard of influencer marketing before that or even attempted to do it. And after that, I ran the clothing brand for about 6 months. And once again, I realized this is so expensive to run. You still need a massive budget. You still need to have an insane website and run ads and et cetera. And that's when I first started saying, okay, let me learn how to run ads myself because I couldn't afford to hire an agency. And that was my first attempt at Facebook ads. That was about 7 years ago on the dot. So I started running Facebook ads and I started looking on YouTube and reading blog articles and just trying to figure out what I'm doing until I realized that the best way to learn is to simply practice. So me and my partner put together a few $1,000. I think it was 2 grand. And we ran an A/B test campaign for about a month and we saw what happened. And we didn't get anything. We got one sale out of 2 grand. But what I did get out of that is I learned the ins and outs of Facebook advertising and I saw the potential that it had because I started studying brands that are doing it successfully. And I realized the certain factors that they incorporate into their ads that capture attention end up resulting in conversion. So I was at a not a I was honestly at a crisis point where I was like, okay, I'm in school. I was studying psychology at the time because what interests me is why people do what they do. And I think that's what drew me to marketing as well on a subconscious level. Because at the end of the day, every time somebody's purchasing something, there's a million different mechanics under the hood that went into that purchase, whether they realize it or not. It could be something from 10 years ago that's laying in their subconscious that triggered them to feel a familiarity to this product and purchase it or to feel trust or safe. And I started thinking, what can I do to get my feet wet in this space? So the first thing that I thought of was I was sitting at a pizzeria and I simply asked the owner, I was like, do you have an Instagram account? And he said, yeah, we have an Instagram account. I said, what's your username? He sends me his username, and they had 3 followers, two blurry photos, and they were following about 600 people. I looked at who they're following. It's all famous people. So I said, how about this? Give me 2 weeks and just let me run your Instagram account. I won't charge you a thing. And I want to try to get you a few hundred followers in a few weeks. And if I do, then we can start talking about a monthly package. And he was like, sure, I have nothing to lose. Now, that being said, it was easier. The fact that we were on a college campus and we were on the main street, I realized that the go-to move would be to promote him to the students in the school. So I went on all of the club's pages at my university and I started following all the people. And the beauty of it was this place had familiarity. People order there all the time, but they just didn't have an online presence. So as soon as we got 5, 6 pictures up, he started seeing followers flood in. Then we did our first offer. Come in and say that you saw us on Instagram, and you'll get $5 off of your large pie. All of a sudden, it was a hit on campus, and people just kept coming in off the Instagram. And that was my first ever Instagram client. After 2 weeks, signed a baby contract, the smallest that you've ever seen. But to me, it was like I hit $1 million lottery because I was like, wow, this concept is actually working. Now, the guy next door, the Chinese place next door, saw this happening and they simply asked him, oh, who's running your social media? He told them it was me. I went, had a meeting with them, and this snowball effect started to take place where all of the restaurants on this main street, was Easton Avenue in New Brunswick, New Jersey. They all started to want to boost their Instagrams. And shockingly, none of them had an online presence. And I loved that, honestly, because it was a challenge for me. I learned how to talk to people. I learned what people want. And most importantly, I learned what people want to see on social media. So after working with restaurants for about 6 months, I felt an itch to go deeper into the waters, essentially, and I wanted to run ads. Now, ads don't work too well for local restaurants. You can run ads like order today or order now, but you're not going to get the result that you want. The owner's not going to get the ROI that they're looking for when you compare it to their spend. So I said, who else can I work with? Well, I had actually attended a martial arts school for about 11 years throughout my childhood into early adulthood. And I visited when I went back home for one weekend, and I asked him quite simply, what are you doing for your marketing? And to my surprise, I saw that he had an entire funnel built out. He had an agency working with him. He was running Facebook and Google ads. And I said, wow, I kind of want to try my luck at this. So I asked him, and he gave me an opportunity, and I'll never forget it. He said he wouldn't pay me until he got his first client, but he'd give me a budget of $1,000, and he just said, go at it. So I built a Google campaign, and for the first 2 weeks, the first $500, we did not get a single conversion. We were just getting spam clicks. Then after 2 weeks, we got our first lead, and that day he called me and he said that we signed our first student, and I was in love with ads ever since. I started optimizing the campaign. I started watching it 5 hours a day, even though nothing was happening. I knew every click when it happened. And that's when I really dissected Google AdWords and learned the ins and outs of the platform and considered myself a novice at that point at Google Ads. Now, the same effects started to happen with the martial arts school. He would go to conferences. His good friends would be like, wow, I'm seeing your school growing. Who are you using? They would recommend me. We'd have a conversation and we'd go at it again. And that's when I realized, okay, there's sort of a formula to this when it comes to ads. Each space has its own formula. Restaurants has one thing that works. Martial arts schools has one thing that works. And then I came to the crossroads where it was like, okay, now I'm working with the restaurants. I'm working with martial arts schools. Do I niche down? Do I stay as a generalist? What do I try to do? Because people always say you don't want to be a jack of all trades, but it's the most, and I agree with that for 99% of circumstances. But when it comes to marketing, there's so many ways to help different businesses that it's hard to kind of funnel yourself into just one and say, this is who I'm going to work with. So I did decide actually to hone in on martial arts schools. And I did that for about 2 years. I worked with 15 to 20 martial arts schools, helped them grow their school, was in love with the process, but eventually I felt like I wanted more as well. So while I was at one of my restaurants, talking to the owner, there was somebody sitting at a table and he overheard the conversation, and it turned out to be a dentist. And he was like, oh, you guys are talking about Facebook ads? We've been running Facebook ads for the past 2 years. It transformed my practice, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, we should just talk about it. He goes, sure, I'm willing to talk about it. Why don't you come to the practice tomorrow and we can have a conversation? I come to the practice and I find out he's working with 4 different agencies. They have systems all over the place. He doesn't actually understand marketing, and he's getting reports and I'm looking at the reports and things aren't looking right. So I just told them, how about this? How about I sit with you on your next team meeting with your marketing teams, and I'll basically bullshit check them while you're in the room and catch things that you wouldn't otherwise catch. And behold, I started catching massive holes in the reporting. Money's being spent that isn't accounted for. Metrics are being fuzzed, you can call it, and people are showing, look, we got 1 million impressions, but 2 clicks. And those clicks were for things that weren't even what he wanted them to click on. So we built a trusting relationship. And now that's where the psychology came into play. And I realized at that moment that marketing is 100% psychology. And my passion for psychology translated directly into marketing, both from the client relationship aspect and from the attention grabbing aspect. Because all you need is people's trust, both from the client side and the customer side. And how do you get that? By being extremely transparent and blunt. And that style did me well, because that style started to make people say, okay. And just a side note, I don't want to go off track, but just a side note,
Sure.
the marketing space is full of frauds, full of frauds. There's people who have zero idea what they're doing, that are marketing themselves as complete bona fide experts in the space. And they outsource all of their work to India or Pakistan, for example, and they don't even take one look at it quality control wise.
Mhm.
So that kind of hindered me at the beginning, because it's a lot harder to gain people's trust when they've been burned in the past. So I embraced this transparent approach, and that approach helped me expand into the dental and medical space, which I ended up staying in for basically the remainder of my time at ScaleWave up until today. But through that process, I started to learn all of the intricacies of Facebook, Google My Business, Instagram, and I realized, okay, what I really like doing is helping business owners grow their business. It's super satisfying to me to take a small business and start seeing them grow and grow and grow, and the happiness that they get from getting these new leads, because I get the same happiness when I get new leads. So that was super rewarding for me, more than the actual marketing itself. I personally don't love being in the weeds and running a campaign that takes 2 hours to set up. But what I love is the end result, and that's enough for me to push through it.
Mhm.
So that's my background when it comes to like how I developed and how I learned marketing and got to this point.
So it's it's interesting that you sort of focus on the trust factor, right? And the blunt honesty. Not to be confused with being blunt, but just being concise in the communication and getting, right to the point, and not dancing around or creating that um, confusing smoke and mirrors that some agencies present themselves around and through. Uh, let's dive into that a little bit deeper in the trust and how you work with that internally, externally. What what methods or what tools do you use to sort of create those relationships?
Sure. So I'll give you an example. A perfect example is, let's say that you have a bad month. There's always going to be bad months. Let's say that you set a target. I want to get 50 leads this month. You got 15 leads. I've seen people myself, it'll come to the end of the month, they'll have 15 leads, they'll come up with every excuse in the book, some valid, some invalid, but essentially they'll just try to brush it off. Me, on the other hand, I'll sit down with the client, I'll say, look, we had a horrible month. I'm going to take some off the top of your invoice. We're going to sit down, dissect this, figure it out, and we're going to use these learnings to make next month 10 times better. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, no, we had a great month and you're seeing the numbers wrong, but look at this, not this. I'm going to sit and be blunt with you, because the reality is, yes, we're going to have bad months. And just to backtrack a little bit, I
Sure.
think setting expectations is the most important thing in building trust. Because if you're
Excellent.
selling somebody a pipe dream, what you're going to end up getting is a feeling of betrayal at the end when that dream doesn't manifest into reality. If I'm telling people I'm going to 10x your business in 1 month and that doesn't happen, the relationship's done. It's broken. I either hit it or I don't. But if I tell someone that I'm going to do everything in my power to help them grow, and they're going to end the month in a better position than they started, this is what I've done in the past. We can expect this, but if it doesn't happen It's not the end of the world. We're going to get there. That's what I realize people like to hear because they're like, okay, if you're expecting a 10x in 1 month and that's your minimum threshold, you're not going to work with me. But if you're expecting to be in a better spot than when you started at the beginning of the month and you're going to eventually get there, then you're going to be in line with each other and you're going to be able to have a collaborative, open conversation that's going to ultimately help the business thrive.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. And what frames that open conversation? How do you how do you start with a new client and um, create that open dialogue that leads to those enriched
Sure.
relationships?
So I think the first step is to one, understand the client's business, because as a business owner myself, there's a million different things that go into running an agency that a pizza shop owner wouldn't understand, and I wouldn't expect them to. But if I'm going to approach a pizza shop owner, I want to understand the restaurant business because that'll help me empathize with his pain points and understand why they're going through what they're going through and automatically think of potential solutions. So the first thing that I do is I ask them, what's the problem? And 99% of the time, not enough customers. Okay, I say, so what are you doing to gain customers right now? And they'll tell me all the things that they're doing. And more often than not, it's either the wrong thing, money getting misplaced, or them getting basically coaxed into diving into something that isn't really where they should be spending their money at any given time. Now, that's an important segue because when it comes to marketing, there's a lot of different things that you can spend money on. And I think one of the most important things is to prioritize depending on the stage that you're at in the business. So I'll approach a brand new business owner much different than someone who's worked with 10 agencies and has a system already that's in place and is working. And I think that personalized approach is what changes things. Now,
Hmm.
it's harmed me in terms of scalability because I have a super personalized approach. I don't set, and this might be a mistake on my end, I don't set full boundaries and say, no, we can only talk for 1 hour a week, or every hour above this, every minute's going to be $10. Or if I say that I'm going to do 10 blog posts and I see an 11th that would really benefit the business, I'm going to do the 11th. And I think that that's a double-edged sword because it harms me in terms of time and productivity, but it helps me in terms of relationship building because I truly do want to help the business grow.
Yeah, so there's some science coming out around, it's always been sort of framed as survival of the fittest. But what we're learning from relationships and from evolution is it could also be survival of the friendliest, where
Yeah.
the 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 community and the relationships and the support and the help that is built around those relationships seems to be the things that really lift and engage and support and allow for survival. That's what helps humans get to where we are today, and it's a blessing and a curse, like you've referred to, where if we're individualized and it's just one against the world, nobody gets to be Apple or Microsoft or Nvidia or any of the other major players out there, to Amazon. They don't get to be there out of the one. They get to be there out of the team. Steve Jobs was interviewed, and one of his last statements was, the greatest thing I ever built was my team. And to your point, nurturing and caring for that team, doing the extra blog posts, going that extra mile. Great piece of advice. So let's look at those initial phases and steps. What areas do you look at improving out the gate for a small business that's initially engaging with you? What are the first things that get built? Maybe first three, first five. What do you look at?
Sure. So the first thing that I try to do is I try to look at where are they currently putting their money and I try to look at where they stand. So current state analysis is the first thing that I do. Second thing that I do is a digital presence checklist. So I like to look at the business's website, social media, any PR they have, blog posts, external mentions, etc., and also their reviews. Then I take a look at the type of business that it is, and I determine, based on my past experience and research, where they should start. So if they have no social media, obviously square one is let's create some social media. Even if we have zero posts, let's get it up there.
Hmm.
You don't have a Google My Business, we need to set it up. So I see that there's building blocks that are mandatory for every business when it comes to marketing. And I think that minimum threshold should be hit by every new business owner. You should be present on all of the platforms you're supposed to be present on. Posting consistently is a different story. Now, secondly, I look at where are your marketing dollars being spent? Because and that's the beauty of marketing. It's an in-demand service. Every business needs to be marketed. You will find some businesses, which I have, that do no marketing, but usually they're not doing so well. The larger the business is, the more marketing that they've been doing, plain and simple. So I like to look at that and I say, okay, are we spending? So if you've been running Facebook ads, you've been spending $2,000 a month on Facebook ads. Is it working? You're telling me you have no leads. Clearly, it's not working. Why have we been doing it for the past 6 months and haven't changed? Let's pause that. I like to take a stop and look approach. I like to stop what's going on. If it's not working, pause everything. Let's look at the metrics. Let's see why this isn't working. And let's move the money where it's going to make the most bang. We cannot keep going on a losing path, spending our money. And secondly, in marketing, it's super easy to waste money because there's so many different facets of marketing. You could go and spend $2,000 on a flyer campaign and it could return not a single person. Whereas if you took that $2,000 and put it into a Google Ads campaign, you could have got 2 to 3 clients from it. So really dissecting and creating that initial strategy of we're going to attack this first, then this, I think is the best approach. And I also take a testing approach where I say, if a business has never run ads before, we need to test Google, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and we need to figure out where does your audience live. So aside from understanding their business, I have to understand their customer. And I like to see if they understand their customer. Because you'd be surprised at how many business owners understand their customer at a high level, but they've never really sat down and broken down their ICP and said, okay, these people live on LinkedIn. These people love Instagram. They spend 6 hours a day on Instagram, but you're not even on there.
Hmm.
So these little insights could be life-changing for some businesses because they say, okay, we're going to cut out Facebook completely and we're going to spend all the budget on Instagram. And what do you know? They 2x their business after that.
So, I mean, I've always been sort of in the camp of if social media is a bit of a megaphone, right? And it's designed. It used to be designed for acquisition, um, maybe based on user base and engagement. Perhaps it's more of a nurturing tool today. Um, we can agree or disagree on that. But so outside of socials, what what's the first thing when you come into a business? I mean, I think we're assuming that a website is live, right? And we're building out that digital footprint. So we've got a website, we've got some socials. Where are we going after that?
So now we're going to look at, has any of this been working for you? And not working in the sense that it's bringing people in immediately. I'm going to say, okay, let me look at your website. Okay, your website is getting 5 visitors a month. Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
Then we find out the website's not indexed.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a lot of people, for example, who have super nice websites and not a single page is indexed. They have a 60-page
Mm-hmm.
website that does not exist on Google. They
Right.
paid 10 grand for it. And now they've wasted 10 grand. And when you tell them, they're absolutely mind boggled that their previous person didn't tell them this. So
Mm-hmm.
the first thing I like to do is look in the back end and I make sure, okay, all the systems are up, but are they operational? They're there, but are they actually, is the mechanics behind it all in place to make it work?
Mm-hmm.
Then depending on the business, I say, are we creating content on the website? And that's my transition into SEO was about 4 years ago when I realized that you can run ads till the end of time. But at the end of the day, you want to create an organic funnel. And that's the goal of every long-term marketing strategy is to create organic buzz. And that's what I want to do from day one from now on. Since 4 years ago, I like to say, okay, the social media, I agree with you actually at this point in time, and it's evolved in the past few years. It's completely a nurturing tool now. When I talk social media, I'm talking just sponsored ads because
Okay.
posts alone are a nurturing tool for your existing audience, 100%.
Right. Right.
the website is one of the most slept on tools for a growing business. And I think that it's an asset that exists for everyone, but it's not being utilized whatsoever.
Right.
So I said, okay, why is it not? And we've gone through this a lot where we've said, okay, there's visitors coming in. Is our messaging right? And the funny part is through your website work, you end up honing in your offer. You end up further understanding what your customer wants to hear. So your website should really be just your digital HQ is how I like to look at it. I like a
Right.
website to be headquarters where someone can go learn about you, what you offer, what your value is, all without spending more than 5 minutes navigating through the page. And I think that's the ultimate goal. So that's where I like to start at these days.
Hmm.
And reached a point in time in the marketing world where if a customer goes on your website and you don't have a clean website, trust is damaged automatically. They go
Hmm.
on your website and you have a 404 error, you're not gonna, you might really lose that customer just off that alone.
Hmm.
So these are super important things.
Where the conversation around SEO is dead. Search GPT and AI is just it's crushing search. It's no longer a thing. What's your what's your take on that perspective? And B, how does how does AI weave its way into this? And is it the devil, or is it a tool that's going to revolutionize humanity? What what do you think?
Sure. So I think that's one of the most interesting topics today. And I think the SEO is dead factor is a bit funny because every few years a new evolution comes down. People say SEO is dead. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was dead. But then you go on the organic results and you see people getting 1 million clicks a month just off organic. So clearly it's still there. It's just constantly evolving and you have to evolve with it in order not to be left behind. I think the introduction of AI makes things a bit more difficult or makes SEO a bit more hairy in terms of where to spend your time the most. But I don't think that it's killed SEO. So when you look something up on Google now and you get the AI response, it works very well for question and answer. Like if I ask how many ounces are in a gallon, you look it up and the AI will tell you in 2 seconds, and you probably won't click on another blog post. But when it comes to more intricate things, like for example, how to structure a business plan properly, the AI will give you 3 bullet points on how to structure a business plan, but any serious actor is going to want to know more than that. So the first thing they're going to do is scroll down and click on the organic results, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, the interesting part is people think, okay, Google's just giving you the answer through AI. Now, the reality is they're taking live websites, scraping them, and offering you the answer. Are they prioritizing higher domain authority websites? More than likely. Are they potentially taking away traffic from the smaller guys? Yes. But it's not in Google's best interest, and people don't think about this. It's really not in their best interest to kill SEO and to kill the small guys building their websites because that's where Google's bread and butter is. It's content and ads. So they want your blog to rank. They want you to place ads on your blog, and they want more people visiting your website through their search engine. If they were to kill SEO, the level of content being produced would cease. It would just go from 100 to zero instantaneously. So I think that we're shifting from keyword stuffing and this super technical SEO space to a user experience space and addressing and answering your customers' concerns in the quickest, most efficient, cleanest way possible. And that's where things are moving. User experience is 10x more emphasized now than it was even a year ago. And that's very important. And by user experience, I mean, let's say you're writing about any topic. Let's say you're writing about a topic like, when should I start running Google ads? You should address, and this is the hardest part to do, and this is what SEO is. It's thinking of every possible question that could spawn and spiderweb off of that concept and incorporating it in an eloquent, easy to read, natural sounding way that resonates with the reader without writing a summer reading essay that's 10 pages long. And I think that's where SEO is headed. And the people who are doing that, you're still seeing them get traffic on their blog posts when other people are not.
So how do you see, I mean, the theory behind Search GPT is that um, it has that natural language model that grabs on to the question that was asked, the conversation that you're having with the agent, and it populates a bunch of options, gives a description, and then gives um, a, uh, a, a a relationship to it. So a link to the article that it's referencing, that it scraped or pulled from. Now, 3, 4, 5 years ago, all the hype was around voice search, and that's going to kill SEO, like you said, because it's going to be a one word response. You got to be top ranker, you're done, um, and that never came to fruition. Can you, or do you have any insight on how this weaves between voice GPT,
Sure.
search GPT, and maybe like Apple Vision, and how that that user interface could augment where tomorrow leads, and how that impacts your business?
Yes, so I think voice search is interesting and it's a bit different than AI search because voice search is a fundamental change in search behavior. So people are used to opening up Google, typing in a question, and then they see the results. Whereas voice, you're using an Alexa, you're using an external device and asking it, and you can't actually see the information in front of you. Now, what I've learned is that works for certain specific things like, Alexa, what's the weather today? Or should I wear a sweater outside today? You don't need Google for that. But anything outside of this direct one line response, nobody's going to use voice search to ask, what is their biosciences prospectus looking like for their most recent earnings release? Alexa's going to start spitting out this mechanical robotic summer reading essay, and you're going to be confused. So
Right.
that's why I think that never took flight because certain things you just need to read. And I think that's fundamental in search behavior. Now, AI is a little bit different and it goes in tandem with AI's on the rise, attention spans are on the decline. So it's kind of a meeting point where people are saying, okay, I want to get the answer as fast as humanly possible. And it's interesting because when ChatGPT first came out, people are like, ChatGPT is going to kill Google by itself, and people are going to use ChatGPT instead of Google. Now we've seen that's not the case. The average mom or dad or grandma is not opening GPT-4 and asking them questions. They're just still going on good old Google.
Hmm.
What Google did is saw this as an opportunity, and now they're essentially using that ChatGPT, Bing AI style platform to bring you the response right away. But once again, it's not fully developed yet to where it can completely answer a complex question. And I think that eventually, just like with any other new invention, people are going to seek more. Because one thing that we're seeing is regurgitation of information at a level that hasn't been seen before. You
Right.
read a blog post sometimes, and people are not editing their blog posts. They're simply churning it out of the AI. They're not using any software to edit it, and they're just posting it. And you can almost tell between, and not everyone can, but I think we're getting to the point where everyone will be able to tell between a machine made blog and a human made blog. And I think it's going to become more obvious over time. Some people say, no, the machine is going to get smarter and it's going to be way more natural. And that's true as well. But it's the style of writing. Like, and I think that that's something to take note of because Google is now rewarding personal experience in your articles. They're rewarding that personal human touch, which is very interesting. So
Yeah.
clearly, Google does not want to kill the human aspect of search. They don't. They're just trying to make it easier for people. Will people give up on forming deeper understandings of the things that they're wondering about? I don't think so. Some people might because their attention span is on a nosedive, but the average, like the real people who want to know answers are not going to give up on actually extensively reading through articles. I don't think so.
So that's an interesting perspective, and I think you know when you understand large language module management and development, in how it creates itself, which GPT is, it bases itself off of predictive, summaries, like, and what most likely comes next. So it can't create anything novel or unique, or be creative in a way, right? So it's it's in, sentient thought maybe is the barrier, and this isn't the time or place to discuss that, but unique concepts that sort of come to mind when you're looking at your team and your future. What does the next 5 years, 10 years look like for you? How do you Are you adopting AI into your business structure with your team members? How do they feel about it? Is it replacing your team? Like, what does that look like culturally within your team?
Sure. So from an agency perspective, a lot of people when ChatGPT and similar platforms came out immediately thought, okay, this is going to end marketing agencies forever. Nobody needs
Yeah, this
content right
VMO.
anymore.
Yeah,
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 exactly.
yeah.
But what you immediately see is that ChatGPT exists. Are business owners using it? Some, the minority actually. And the ones who are using it do not know how to unlock its full potential. So AI becomes a tool for agencies and my agency to just expand on what we were already doing, make it more efficient, and be able to produce more with less. Because people have a misconception, like, and I'm sure you've used ChatGPT. If you just go on ChatGPT and say, write me a blog on cats, it's going to be horrendous. There's no doubt about it. It's going to be the most basic blog post you've ever seen. So prompting in itself has evolved as a skill and a service just by itself alone. Then editing the prompt and editing that output is another service on its own. So it's really rolling with the tide, riding the wave essentially, and utilizing these new innovations to further help your clients and to further help your business by increasing efficiency. That's how I see AI as a tool for speed.
Mhm.
That's honestly how I view it. And I think that it's impacted my team in the sense that it's now placed a higher emphasis on creativity. And I think this is true across the board. Creativity is going to become more and more rewarded as time goes on. And that human aspect is going to be yearned for because at the end of the day, we crave human connection and personal touches. We crave personal advice from people. We don't always want to ask a machine what it thinks. We want to ask a well-traveled traveler what he thought about going to Cuba. We don't want to ask the AI what it thinks about going to Cuba. So that's just one example of how people yearn for that personal experience, and that's going to be rewarded as time goes on. And the
Mhm.
creativity in the sense of how you use the AI is also super important because with new technology comes new use cases and new applications. For example, instead of just using it to create blog posts, now we can set up a ChatGPT chatbot on the website to talk to our customers, and we can train it with data that we've collected before AI even existed. So it's not an evil thing. I think it's a good thing. I
Mhm.
think that if used properly, it can really expand your services and it can expand the breadth of what you can offer. But I also think it is something to be wary of in order to figure out how to use it and not be left behind because it's changing super fast, and what was in use yesterday might not be in use tomorrow and there could be something to replace it. So staying on top of these developments I think is more important than ever.
Yeah, no, and I agree. It's the evolution, right? It's horses were put out of work by the automobile. The abacus was put out of work by the calculator. The interesting thing is we've never had more information at our fingertips. But I is it that it's just too easily accessible? The universities were locked behind big expensive tuitions, and now, I mean, to a certain extent, that's not the case, right? You're missing out on the creativity of the arts and the nuance of the professors. But I mean, there's other ways to gather that education, I suppose. So kind of an interesting perspective. So if AI is a tool and not the death of marketing, what challenges are you facing in moving towards your vision for ScaleWave as time moves forward?
Sure. So as these developments take place, there's also an issue where people are getting overwhelmed because AI has expanded and it's proliferated across all industries. What you're seeing now is like cold outreach has gotten easier. Simple, just Spamming content has gotten easier. So the overall noise level has increased tenfold. So there's a lot more confusion in the space now. AI has become sort of a cringe buzzword that people, and it's still early and it's already become this way. If you approach somebody and you're like, oh, our AI tools, there's certain people that will wince at that and say, oh God, like, all right, what do you have? He's just putting together this and this and this software. And there's a lot of people basically muddying the waters. I think that there needs to be more clarity. I think that part of doing that is experimenting with different things and finding different stacks that work for you and getting creative in stacking different tools. And I think that that's really finding appropriate use cases that are creative is where I'm at now in order to further implement AI into my business. And it's fun to me, for example, like you see how you could use Chat GPT Surfer combination for SEO, and you could also run it through Grammarly, which is now using AI, and you could stack 4 or 5 softwares together. That's for blogging. I want to find different ways to do it for advertising, for creating imagery, for creating videos and social media content at scale. And finding these tools for those use cases is where I'm at right now, while ignoring all of the noise. Because
Mhm.
every day there's a new tool coming out. You use it, it's horrendous. You use another one, it's good. You've paid for this, you pay for that. So now there's just like 50 different softwares you're paying for, trying to figure out what's the right one. And
Mhm.
that's a process in itself. And that's what I'm kind of going through right now.
AI just becoming a commodity in its application and trying to find the arbitrage that leads to that path to success. And
Exactly.
what systems are what systems are serving you well, what systems are failing, and how are you iterating on those systems to sort of continue to lift you up towards that success?
Sure. So I found that from a content development standpoint, it's super helpful. I think that it's canceled out the concept of writer's block because if you
Hmm.
can't think of something to write, the AI, in my opinion, still isn't at the level where I'd be comfortable just taking and copying and pasting its output. But I think that it gives you a super solid foundation to go off on yourself. So if you're a good writer yourself, you can put anything into Chat GPT, get an idea and concept from its output, and then build off of it and give your own personal touch to it. So I think that that's a really strong point of, and a system that I implement. One thing that I think is lacking is, for example, image creation and social media creation with AI, I think is super, super behind. Because a lot of times you'll try to create an image or you'll try to create a content calendar and you'll use AI to do it. And 90% of the posts have severe flaws in them that you would have just saved time making them yourself on Canva. So I think that that's a severe lack when it comes to AI. I think also AI, when it comes to cold outreach, is a bit difficult because it's really lacking personal touch sometimes, and people feel like they're being approached by a bot. And
Mhm.
that falls back into the trust conversation where people don't always want to feel. And of course, part of that is also personalizing your cold outreach. Even if it's AI, you could still personalize it, and that's a process in itself. But a lot of people aren't. I get emails all the time. I'm sure you've gotten cold emails where it's just, I could just tell this is Chat GPT copy and paste coming into my inbox.
Mhm.
Now I'm turned off a little bit, honestly, because I'm like,
Yeah.
they don't really care about me. They just hit me with a Chat GPT and it's done for.
Yeah, so I mean that's an interesting point because you know in some of I know our team's outreach, we will actually implement personalized conversations and reach out personally or our chat on our website is I'm on the other side of that. If I'm in office, then and a message comes through, I'm answering that. But majority of the time, you know if I notice that someone's on the website and I write out to them, there's no response. And I think it's specifically exactly as you pointed to. It's a lack of trust. It's just the assumption is that it's a bot. It's not a person. It's and it's not real. So how do we how do we bridge that gap? How do we rebuild that trust? How do you manage that for your clients today?
Sure. So I think it's finding a balance. And I think a good example is like if you buy something very expensive,
Mhm.
and let's say you get a warranty on it and then something goes wrong and you call customer support, And for the life of you, you can't get a human on the line. Now you spent thousands of dollars for this product and they don't have the decency to speak to you when something goes wrong. It's going to break that trust. You're going to feel like I don't want to purchase from these people anymore because they're not caring about me. Now, let's say I wanted to call and I wanted to say, okay, what are their hours of operations? And they had an automated IVR system that told me their hours. I like that. Maybe I don't want to talk to somebody at that time, but I
Mhm.
want the option. I want press zero to speak to a human. And I think that that balance is how you bridge the gap by
Mhm.
giving people the convenience of immediate responses from AI, but also giving them the option to have an in-depth conversation when they need it. Without that balance, things are going to go awry.
Choices. Just offer
Yeah,
choices. Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, no, good perspective. So where where do you see um what's your next hire? Where do you take things?
So I'm also in the process now of building out a larger team, and I think that one of the most difficult things is figuring out who to hire first.
Hmm.
Gary Vee has spoken about this a lot actually before with the different types of individuals that you need on your team. And I personally believe after years of being a solo operator, I only even started working with other people only about a year and a half ago. For about 6 years, I was the only person doing everything. And you learn eventually that one, you miss out on great ideas when you don't have others to bounce things off of. Two, you overwork yourself. Three, there's a consistency in the output that's either good or bad, depending on how you're doing. That is different when you have four people contributing, because you could have one person slacking, but the other three will pick up the slack and do a good job. And that's what I'm on right now. I kind of want Funny, I want a jack of all trades would be my next hire would be a mini me. And that's the hardest thing to find, a mini you, because not a lot of people are built like you, for example, and will think like you. And I think that's the go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting perspective, and I don't think you're alone in that. But I think what would serve you well is layering in a matrix of your strengths and your weaknesses and exploring blind spots around where you struggle, what you don't like, and finding someone that truly loves doing the things that you don't like. And maybe it's fractional to start, but it allows you to let go of the 80% and focus on the 20% that serves you the best. And maybe that's a good tactic to look at for the next one. I totally appreciate the mini me, right? And you got from where you were to where you are, and obviously if we just get two of those, we'll be twice as big. But sometimes that's not the way the algorithm works, right? and
Yes.
and like you said, finding someone completely different offers that unique alternative perspective that allows you to really gain lift. So I don't know, something to consider. But I,
That
I
makes
do.
total sense.
Yeah.
And I think doing that formal assessment of my strengths and weaknesses from a business perspective, I think is the first step, like you said, to figuring out, okay, if a mini me is not possible, which is probably not, what do I need most urgently?
Mhm.
And that's something I'm definitely going to take away and dive into.
Hmm. Hmm. So what allows you, like, what does serve you well when you're making those kinds of decisions? What do you sit down and you lay out your priorities, or do you rely on instinct? What does your decision matrix look
So
like?
basically, I look at it as what's been bothering me the most for the past month. And if it's
Okay.
something that's been bothering me, that I'm like, okay, my sales process isn't working. I haven't been getting responses, or I'm not this for HVAC companies, my Google ads have not been working. I've looked at you, I've done a million different things and I can't figure it out. That's when I start to think, okay, am I good at this or am I not good at this? And not from a cliche existential perspective. It's more just of a blunt reflective perspective of I'm running a business. I can't take this personally. It's just, am I good at this or am I not? If I'm not, I really want to outsource it because I don't want to be that guy who says, no, I'm going to become a pro at everything and end
Mhm.
up destroying my own self in the process, which I see a lot of times as well.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think where that comes into play is we all have our unique geniuses, right? And we all have that area, that unique talent that that AI doesn't have, right? AI can be the generalist. Allow us to have that unique creativity, that unique novel idea, creating something out of nothing, and being able to build and grow and leverage on that, and then rely on that community and bring back in that survival of the friendliest to sort of collaboratively build and grow on those aspects. So yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree. It's those blocks. So you're looking at what frustrates you the most. Great start. Then how do you measure that? Because what gets measured gets done. How do you measure that against next steps that you take?
So I mean, I measure that when I set mental KPIs. I should probably be doing it in a more formal way, but I set mental KPIs. And I say, okay, the past month we didn't hit this KPI. The last month we didn't hit this KPI. Now I look at what it is that's bothering me. Let's say sales, and I start dissecting that. And I go, what about the sales is lacking? And sometimes it comes down to messaging. And with marketing in general, a lot of times everything comes down to messaging and communication at its core. And that's
Mhm.
something I know that you appreciate, that at the core of every marketing campaign is communication. What's your message? Who are you messaging? And how are you conveying that message to them?
Mhm.
So that is the hardest thing for me to craft still after almost 8 years of doing this. Every business has its own style of messaging. Every offer needs to be crafted a certain way because I've seen clients that have had incredible offers. For example, 1.5 months of free martial arts, free uniform, free Sunday seminars included, all free, but it's just not messaged properly and nobody signs up. But then we simply tweak it and make it more appealing, and all of a sudden signups go through the roof.
So what if the cost of service isn't the barrier, right? And that's not what's of value to the client or to your ICP. What if getting the kid to the session is critical, and the gym down the street offers free busing from school? Boom. So having that communication mechanism, asking for feedback and listening to your community, and then in kind. And I sort of always position this as listen to understand and then speak to be understood. And I
Yes.
think, that's a drastic miss when the vast majority of the population that aren't in a leadership role, and even some of those that are, speak just just wait to be the one that speaks next, and they aren't actually taking the time to turn on that active listening and take in what's being shared, and then acting on what they've learned. They just they have the audacity to believe that they're the ones that know best, and their way is the way that will work, as opposed to softening that, listening to and benefiting from the alternative perspectives to allow them to take those steps to growth and unlocking that next pathway.
And I totally agree. And for me, it came through a humbling experience because at first I was succeeding and the business was growing super quickly. And my
Mhm.
first instance of of starting a 3 month trial and not having a good 3 months made me realize that no, I don't know everything, and it's okay not to know everything. And let me actually listen rather than get offended at the criticism. And that's when things started to change for me. I started taking criticism as just
The gift.
objective feedback, not taking it personally. And
Mhm.
that's what changed everything because it's not personal. It's just some things like, okay, you did this wrong. Does it mean that I'm a bad person, that I'm stupid, that I'm a failure? No, it's just I did it wrong. So let me do it right the next time.
Yep.
And once I started listening to people more, understanding what they want, our relationships improved, the service improved, everything improved at the end.
So
So
that's an interesting point. And I often have to work through with my clients around detachment from criticism, and the awareness that they're not attacking you as a person, they're attacking the object that you've been fighting with, and or that you presented. And it's not that, as you pointed out, it's not that you're an idiot. It's just maybe there's a perspective or a shift or, a, an angle of attack that was off by a few degrees that needs to be adjusted or shifted. And the ability to detach yourself from your work and say, okay, here's my body of work. Let's tear it apart. Now I'm gonna leave behind the stuff that doesn't serve me, leave those rocks on the floor. And I'm gonna take all the things that did serve me, throw those into my backpack and carry on down my path. And I
Yep.
think, that is an incredibly valuable lesson and one of those things that, you know, really serves you well when you're able to detach and remove that emotional connection with what you've been creating. It can be an item of love and something of passion, but it's not you. You are
Yep.
you. That is just your work. And not to say that it doesn't have value, it has deep, deep value. But do you want it to be its best? Do you want to be right? Or do you want to get it right? And do you want it to grow and get to be where it rightly should be if it's something that you're proud of and you know you want to work towards excellence. Practice doesn't make perfect. It allows you a path to grow and expand, and practice is progress. It's not perfection. So I think that's an interesting take from what you shared. And good for you for learning that. That's a tough lesson learned.
It is a tough lesson. I think it's one of the many, many things that separate good leadership from great leadership, because it's also inherent in leaders. They like to be right. They have a yearning to be. That's why they're a leader. That's why they were drawn to being a leader, because they have this type A, not always fully type A, but a type A personality where they want to know the right thing. And it's kind of like you're in competition with yourself, where it's like if you do something with the intention that you're doing it right and you don't, you feel that internal feeling of like, I failed at this, even if it's not anyone's fault. And sometimes you don't want to admit it. But letting go of that and just admitting when you failed at something is one of the keys, in my opinion, that's helped me in life. It really is. And
And I
just
think
know, go ahead.
I think that's where great leadership comes from, right? Is competing with yourself. You're not competing with anyone else. You're just trying to be better, a better version of you today than you were yesterday. And if you fail, it's a learning. It's not something that needs to tear you down. You can be down about it for a period, but then recognize and realize that it was a learning. Take that and carry it with you. Leave the failure behind. Leave the feelings that don't serve you well behind. Feelings are made to be felt. Feel them. Take a moment for that, but then take steps forward. And you constantly see visions of the feedback loop. In socials, right? Where, in fact, the podcast logo is a feedback loop. You go up, you come down, you go up again. And at the end of it, you're higher than when you started. And that's really the goal, I think.
I agree.
Beautiful. So anything, where can we find you? Where do we connect with Scalewave? What?
Sure. So I'm on all social medias. I'm on LinkedIn as Scale Wave Marketing, my website, www.scalewavemarketing.com. You guys can feel free to message me on Instagram. Same thing, Scale Wave Marketing. I'm always the one who responds. And I
Perfect.
try to keep as present as possible on those platforms.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, we'll include those in the show notes. Any closing thoughts? Anything exciting that you're bringing to the market?
I have a couple things in the works, but I think as closing thoughts, just being open to trying new things, being
Awesome.
open to making mistakes and taking risks is one of the most important things for me. And I think everyone should take some risks in their life, educated risks, but sometimes you just got to say, just do it. And if you feel like doing it, just do it.
Yeah. Give more than you take.
Yes.
Perfect. Nadim, it's been a pleasure. as always, love speaking with you, and thank you very much for sharing your story.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Ciao.
Bye.